When September arrives, there will be a new entrant in the upper echelon of the group of six tailgating scene. The championship started 100 years ago in the old North Central and have become an embarrassment of riches. From playing Morningside and St. Cloud at the turn of the century, to playing Air Force and UNLV only a quarter century later, dominating on the field and a rabid fan base off it have set North Dakota State on a rapid ascent through college football. We will begin with North Dakota State's Nielsen-rated games versus FBS schools and then later do FCS games. There were 5 such games, and we'll look at each game from 2 perspectives. The first perspective, how the opponent's ratings fared in other games on the same network and time slot. And the second perspective, how North Dakota State's ratings compared to other P5 versus G5 games on the same network and time slot. We'll start with the most recent game, Colorado on ESPN in 2024. These are Colorado's ratings on ESPN weeknight games in the Deion era, and this will isolate for the opponent being Colorado, the network being ESPN, weeknights, and of course Deion era, since Colorado's ratings in the Deion era are much higher than pre-Deion. And in 4 such games, Colorado's game against North Dakota State was the highest rated with 4.76 million viewers. In 29 P5 versus G5 ESPN weeknight games since 2012, that Colorado-North Dakota State matchup was first of all 29 at 4.76 million. The second game we'll look at is Arizona on FS1 in 2022. Arizona had a dozen FS1 late night Saturday games, and this will obviously isolate for the opponent being Arizona, the network being FS1, and the time slot being late night Saturday. Of these dozen games, North Dakota State was the lowest at 335,000. However, the other 11 teams that Arizona played are Power 5 opponents. And North Dakota State, despite being FCS, was competitive ratings-wise with a lot of these games. Now here are the FS1 late night Saturday matchups between the P5 and G5 since 2013. There were 15 of them, and that Arizona-North Dakota State matchup ranked 6th of the 15, so top 40%, which compares very well to similar matchups. The third game we'll look at is North Dakota State against Iowa on the Deuce in 2016. In total, Iowa played 20 games in the ESPN2 Saturday noon slot since 2012. 18 of those 20 were against Power 5 opponents. The other 2 were Middle Tennessee and North Dakota State. The North Dakota State game ranked 7th of those 20 games with 968,000 viewers. So despite 18 of these 20 games being against Power 5 opponents, the North Dakota State game still ranked 7th, which was in the top 35%. Now we'll look at all Power 5 versus G5 matchups on the Deuce on noon Saturdays, and there were 23 of those in total. The Iowa-North Dakota State game ranked 4th of those 23, which would put it in the top 20% of similar matchups in the same network and time slot. And when you consider number 1 and number 2 were Ohio State, Michigan, 2 blue bloods of the sport, 4th of 23 is pretty remarkable. The fourth game we'll evaluate was against Iowa State on FS1 in 2014. In total, Iowa State played 18 games in the FS1 Saturday noon slot since 2013. 15 of them were against Power 5 opponents. 1 was ULM, 1 was North Dakota State, and 1 was Northern Iowa. One thing to note was the Iowa State and Northern Iowa game went into triple overtime, and Iowa State was ranked in the top 25. So they got a bit of a boost from being in triple overtime and potentially the first big upset of the season when all the other noon games had concluded and all the viewers were going to their game to see what would happen. Of these 18 games, the North Dakota State game ranked 12th of 18 with 407,000 viewers, which beat out 5 games against Power 5 opponents. Now looking at all FS1 noon Saturday P5 versus G5 games since 2013, there were 23 of them, and the Iowa State-North Dakota State matchup ranked 9th of those 23, which would put it in the top 40%. And when you consider number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 are big ratings draws like Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, the North Dakota State game drew pretty well. Now the fifth game we'll look at is Kansas State on FS1 in 2013. Kansas State had 4 FS1 weeknight games since 2013, and their game against North Dakota State was the lowest at 585,000. Of course, the other 3 games were Power 5 opponents. However, note that the North Dakota State-Kansas State game on Friday, August 30, 2013, was the second ever college football telecast on FS1 when many fans didn't yet know FS1 exists. For context, the first ever FS1 telecast, Utah State, on Thursday, which was the day before, drew only 311,000 viewers. So when you provide that context, the North Dakota State rating was actually pretty good here. If we look at all FS1 weeknight P5 versus G5 matchups since 2013, the Kansas State-North Dakota State game ranked 7th of those 15 in the top half, despite being the second ever telecast on FS1 and many viewers not knowing FS1 existed yet. So that's another rating that looks pretty good for North Dakota State. When you look at the 5 graphs that compared the similar matchups being P5 versus G5 on the same network and time slot, the North Dakota State matchup ranked in the top half all 5 times, and even once it ranked first. So in a small sample size of 5 Nielsen-rated games against FBS opponents, North Dakota State came out looking really good. North Dakota State had 4 Nielsen-rated regular season games against FCS schools. I'm not going to do postseason games because those are typically played when there's no other competition, so it does not simulate a regular college football Saturday. 2 of these 4 games, Montana and Charleston Southern in 2015 and 2016, were played week 0 with no opposing games. So there's nothing to really compare those to. So we'll focus on the games against South Dakota State in 24 and 25 on the Deuce in ESPNU. And we'll compare those ratings to Group of 5 versus Group of 5 games on the same network and time slot. First, the 2024 game on the Deuce on primetime Saturdays. There have been 5 such matchups since 2021, and at 174,000 viewers, North Dakota State and South Dakota State was first of those 5 matchups, beating out 3 American games and 1 Sunbelt game. And finally, the 2025 North Dakota State-South Dakota State matchup on ESPNU will compare it to all ESPNU primetime Saturday Group of 5 versus Group of 5 matchups since 2023. In 24 such matchups, the North Dakota State-South Dakota State game once again ranked first, beating out all of the other 23. And really only the Tulane game was close to them. The North Dakota State-South Dakota State game actually doubled the viewership of 2/3 of these matchups, 16 of these 24. It's a small sample size of 2, but once again, North Dakota State comes away looking really, really good in ratings when compared to G5 versus G5 matchups on the same network and time slot. Moving on to finances, here are the top 20 Group of 5 ticket sales in 23-24, which was the last year available on the Night Commission database. North Dakota State, despite being FCS, ranked 17th when compared to the Group of 5 at $4.54 million. Shifting from ticket sales to donor contributions, here are the top 20 Group of 5 4-year average donor contributions per the Night Commission. And North Dakota State would have ranked 13th in the Group of 5 with their 4-year average. So they're generating an impressive amount of revenue from ticket sales and donor contributions. And if we add up ticket sales, donor contributions, and then advertising, sponsorships, licensures, and combine those 3 categories into a total called self-generated revenue, North Dakota State once again would have ranked in the top 20 of the Group of 5 in self-generated revenue in 23-24. These numbers demonstrate that North Dakota State has the fan base, the big money donors, and the corporate support to be top 20 in generating their own revenue in the Group of 5. If we look at the least subsidized Group of 5 budgets by percentage, per USA Today, it was last updated in 21-22, North Dakota State would have, by percentage, the least subsidized budget in the Group of 5 at 25.9%, which bodes well for North Dakota State growing their budget because they can tap into student fees and institutional support as they're not anywhere close to being capped out on either of those. Which brings us to the next slide. The Group of 5 budgets with less than $20 million in subsidies in 23-24 per the Night Commission, there are only 7 such schools. And North Dakota State was not only one of those 7, but they would also rank second in the Group of 5 who rely least on institutional support and student fees for their budget. All of this bodes very well for North Dakota State financially because they're A, self-sufficient, and B, they have wells that they haven't even gone knee deep in that many, many Group of 5 schools have already capped themselves out on. Finally, what North Dakota State is most known for is their on-the-field dominance. And North Dakota State, their 10-year Sagarin, would not only rank 34th in the country, it would rank second in the group of 6 behind only Boise State. And lastly, here is an alumni map for North Dakota State, which shows where there are over 98,000 alumni live all across the country. And while North Dakota State obviously carries the state of North Dakota, this also shows that they have a presence in the state of Minnesota, as over 33,000 North Dakota State alumni reside in Minnesota, which is over 1/3 of North Dakota State alumni. And having a slice of Minnesota probably helps out North Dakota State in their viewership.